Good morning. Have everybody come in. Good morning and welcome to this week's Grow, where we gather to recharge, organize, and work here as members of MWAG. We're so glad that you are joining us today. We have a great guest with us. She is a member of MWAG, and she is also the founder and architect of the independent and political reform movement. Her name is Kathy Stewart, and she is with Open Primaries. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about Kathy, and then I will turn the time over to her. So for the past 35 years, she has conceived and exhausted the successful targeted base building projects among independent and independent aligned voters, which sounds very nonpartisan for MWAG members. As vice president for national development at Independent Voting for over 15 years, she designed and implemented strategic bottom-up organizing with the goal of making independent voters visible and included in America's political process. She is also the national organizing director at Open Primaries, like I said, which advances the principle that no American should be forced to join a political party in order to vote in a public election. She serves as the project manager for Let Us Vote, which is building a growing movement of independent voters who care deeply about our country and want our democracy to grow and innovate, not divide and stagnate voters. Kathy earned her master's of, let's see, her MSN. Well, I just clicked back. Sorry. From Simmons College and her bachelor's from Wheaton College. After living in New York City for 33 years, she now lives in rural upstate New York. We were just talking about the fall colors and how they're changing. She is a prize-winning photographer, an avid snail mail enthusiast, and vice chair of the Battenkill Corral. So we are just really, really thrilled to have her with us today. So I will turn the time over to Kathy. She can tell you some more. And I can already tell you that we're kindred spirits. With snail mail, I just pulled out some thank you notes to stick, and I collect stamps so that they get interesting stamps on their mail. So I love that. So why don't you tell us some more about what you're doing with Open Primaries, and if you want to share your screen.
I will. Actually, maybe I'll just say hello so you can all see me. It's great to see everybody. And I just want to start by thanking MWAG. I am so proud of the work in Utah and the win in the courts to preserve citizen redistricting. On so many levels, it's a very exciting victory, but it's very encouraging to see what small groupings of citizens can accomplish. So thank you to the whole MWAG community. I will share my screen now. I'm so delighted to have the opportunity to be together. Let's see if this worked. Okay. So today, okay, that worked. So today I'm going to give you guys a whirlwind tour of the rise of independent voters across the country. And before I dive into that, I just want to say a little bit more about our organization, Open Primaries. We were founded in 2009, and our mission is to advocate for open and nonpartisan primary systems that allow all voters equal access to the first round of votings. We do a lot of public education. We do litigation, we train spokespeople, we conduct and support research and participate in the building of state and national coalitions to win open primaries on the ground, because it's really an issue that you have to win state by state by state. So we work with all sectors, voters, policymakers, elected officials, good government groups, business leaders, community activists, to educate, build bridges, and develop this movement to make sure that no American has to join a political party to vote in an election that we pay for. We have two entities. Our advocacy arm is a 501c4, and then we have the Open Primaries Education Fund, which is really focused on research, litigation, and educating the public. It's the Open Primaries Education Fund that has launched Let Us Vote, which I'm the project manager of. We are building a network of independent voters across the country who care deeply about our country and want to make sure that our democracy grows and innovates instead of stagnating and dividing us. So who are independent voters? Right now, 43% of Americans consider ourselves independent. That's more than either Democrat or Republican. This slide is actually from Gallup. Gallup does trends. They've been following the growth of independent voters for decades. So this is their 2024 data. It's exactly the same this year. They just released their second quarter data, and the numbers are consistent and the same. So let me give you a little profile. Pretty much every week from 2002 to 2022 to 2024, 10,000 Americans are re-registering as independents. 50% of young people are independent, 52% of Hispanic American voters, 41% of Asian American voters, 20% of African Americans, 27% of Native Americans, 28% of Americans who are of mixed racial heritage, and 55% of post 9/11 veterans are all independents. That's a huge swath of the American people. I wanted to focus for a moment on communities of color, and I'm hoping, can you guys see? Do I need to move this? I'm going to move this. So what those numbers translate to is that over 18 million eligible Latino voters are independent, 7 million African-American voters, and 6 million Asian American voters. And we just put together a fact sheet, and we asked two young activists why they think this is happening in their communities. So just so you can see, Juliana said she thinks many Latinos are tired. The politicians do the same thing year after year and things don't get better. We have to be more independent to get anything done. And Brianna shares, I think many African Americans are becoming independent because they're not satisfied with either party. I'm an independent because I choose to keep my mind, my ideology, and my beliefs open. Those themes run across all demographics among independent voters. So again, let's just take a look at, let's just take a look at what it looks like at a state level. Right now, independent voters are the largest group of voters in 9 states. And you can see the states, so it's pretty diverse across the country. In Colorado, just this month, independent voters passed the 50% mark. So more than 50% of registered voters in Colorado are independents. In almost every other state that has partisan registration, independent voters are the second largest group of registered voters.
Kathy, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Of those states not mentioned, are a lot of them where they have closed primaries where you have to be registered to get your ballot? Like I know in Arizona, you have to be registered with either party, and then because if you are an independent voter, you have to request a ballot. So you can't just get a ballot, right?
I
In the
know,
mail.
right?
So it makes it tricky to be an independent voter. So I just wonder, do they have the data, and you might get to this, but do they have the data on the states where they don't allow it?
Well, here's what's interesting. That's a really good point. And just so that we all are on the same page, every single state has a different matrix of laws around how elections are conducted and how independent voters are related to. So actually, Arizona gets considered a semi-open primary state, even though it's a very big mail state. And if you want your ballot by mail, you have to request it every single time if you're going to maintain your independent status. But let me see if I can address this. Of these 9 states, Connecticut, Oregon, Nevada are all closed primary states. So in those states, even though independent voters are giving up their right to vote in primaries, they're still choosing to register independent. To go to your point, though, one of the things that we think should be researched is we think all voters should be asked how they consider themselves, not just how you're registered. For example, in New York City, closed primary states, one of the most closed down states in the country, there was a study done in New York City where they asked Democrats what the main reason was that they were registered Democrat. You know what the answer was? To vote in primaries. So in my mind, those are independent voters who feel that they must register in a party to have an effective vote in the primary. So that's a question that really more research should be done. And it's a very, very valid point. And it's part of why primaries are closed. It's a coercive mechanism to inflate party rolls. So to dive in more on this, independent voters in America today are misunderstood by the public, by their neighbors, by everybody. They're maligned by particularly the political science class that does very bad political science on independent voters, and we're going to get into that, and sort of the political pundits and the media, and they're marginalized. And they're marginalized all across the country, but especially in closed primary states, because here's what happens. In a closed primary state, who the candidates talk to are prime voters in the primary. And they rarely face competitive elections in the fall, so they never talk to independent voters. So independent voters, and this is a concern with young people, if you're a young independent voter, no one's actually coming after you to ask you to vote. So it creates a very, very negative culture, not one of inclusion or that encourages participation. So at Let Us Vote, we often say, we have the numbers, 43% of Americans, but not the narrative. And we're trying to change that at all levels, but most especially from the bottom up. So here's an example of what I mean about the press. So this was an article 2 years ago in the New Republic. You gotta love the subheading, and I didn't make it red. They made it red. Phantom swingers. The rise of independent voters is a myth. A recent poll found that nearly half of Americans identify as independent, but they're hiding the real truth about how they vote. Now, talk about a nasty start to an article, but that's what independents face all the time. We're told we're not really independent because we might vote in the fall for a Democrat or Republican. So let me see if I can get the top of this to show. So what are the barriers that independents face? Well, we're treated as second-class citizens. 46 states use party-controlled primary election systems that restrict the participation of registered independents. 22 states restrict independents from participating in the presidential primaries. That's 27 million Americans that were denied the right to vote in the 2024 presidential primary. At some point, we have to look at the outcomes we get given the skewed process that we go through. The Federal Elections Commission is bipartisan, not nonpartisan. And in almost all of our states, elections are administered by party members. Even like in many states, right down to poll workers. You can't even volunteer to be a poll worker if you're an independent. Oh. So some things to know about independent voters. When we choose to be independent, it has meaning. It is a political identity. It's a self-conscious choice. It's not a mistake, right? We're making a statement about how the political culture and the whole partisanship of our climate right now are undermining our democracy. Being an independent isn't just about who you vote for, it's about what you stand for. Independents aren't moderates. That's a very big myth that gets tossed around. Some of us are conservative, some of us are liberal, and some of us don't like ideological categories or don't fit into any ideological category. Here's an interesting stat from research done at Arizona State University. Independents are less likely than partisans to end a friendship over a political dispute. Another fact, little interesting fact that they found in this same study is independent voters tend to have more diverse news sources than their partisan counterparts. And I think that's kind of fascinating. So I like to say independents aren't leaners. See, that's what the media does, and the political pundits and the pollsters. They ask you, how do you identify? Democrat, Republican, or independent? If you say independent, 99% of the time, they ask you a follow-up question. How do you lean, Democrat or Republican? And then they take your leaner category and they say, oh, see, you're not really an independent. Crazy making. So I like to say independents aren't leaners. We're leaners. We're leaders. Now I put in learners. I didn't mean that. I meant leaners. And what I mean by leaders is that independent voters have made a self-conscious choice to do something that's a small act of non-compliance. It's a way of saying there's something broken with the way the two-party system is working, and I don't want to affiliate with it. That's what I mean. And we're leading a trend. 43% of the country is now independent. So what do people say when you ask independents why they're independent, which almost no one does, but Unite America did. And here are some of the answers that they got. They gave people a range of options, and these are the ones that rose above the 50% mark, except the bottom two are the same. So I'm not sure what to say about that. But you see, it's people want to vote for the person, not the party. They feel like the parties are too influenced by outside corporate interests or lobbyists. I think for myself, independent of what parties and candidates tell me to think, I believe the political system is corrupt and needs reform. And I value political flexibility and freedom. Those are the ones that got above 60% in this polling. And this was done last year in February. Let me just take a moment to focus on younger independents, our Gen Z independents. NBC News did a poll in April, and they found that 65% of Gen Z independents believe neither Democrats nor Republicans fight for people like them. 78% believe the country is on the wrong track. And I like this quote from the article because I think it's helpful in understanding what's happening as younger people are becoming voters. Many voters are coming into politics without strong ties to traditional parties. I mean, they've grown up in a time when the party system hasn't exactly been delivering what we need. One of the things that we do at Let Us Vote to try to counter some of the really negative press that independents get is we have something called our Independent Speak Out series, and it's for social media. We share it on our website and our newsletters, and we ask independents to tell their story and share why they're independent. So I just picked two examples. One is from a veteran, a former U.S. Army Ranger, who says, I'm an independent and always have been because neither party accurately reflects my political views. The dominant two-party system and political polarization across the country are tearing the nation apart and dividing Americans along arbitrary partisan lines. Independents are not non-committal, apathetic individuals. Rather, they are those who are frustrated with the faction-centric system that has led to stagnation, distrust, and animosity across the country's political landscape. Sandy Hebley is a retired nurse. She lives in Texas, and she says, I'm an independent both because both parties seem to put partisanship over country. The result is gridlock, and nothing good gets accomplished. Very similar themes. And I hear this all across the country in conversations with independents every day. So here you have 43% of the country that's independent, and we have a problem, the primaries. The photos on the left are from pickets that were held in cities across New York State that were holding major mayoral elections and city council elections in June of this year. So independent voters picketed, informational pickets, talked with voters, talked with the media about the fact that while they paid for those primaries, they couldn't vote in them. 85% of US elections are decided in the primary, not the general. And just to be clear about that, the reason that's true is that our November elections, 85% of them aren't competitive, right? Because of gerrymandering and closed primaries, whoever wins the primary, it's pretty much a foregone conclusion. And that's one of the ways that independent voters get marginalized. No one ever talks to them. Here are the closed primary states that are locking millions of independent voters out from publicly funded elections. I won't read them out loud. You can look at them. It's across the country. Some very, very big decisive states here. I just want to say also, we have closed primaries in DC, even though in 2024, an initiative was passed overwhelmingly in every single ward, overwhelmingly, to enact ranked choice voting in the fall and open primaries for the primaries. And the DC Common Council refused to fund the move to open primaries. We have one more year to get them to fund it, but it's an outrage. The voters said, we're doing this, we want to do this, and the council has stopped that from being enacted. So that fight is not over yet. In the closed primary states, this makes sense, right? Given all the stats we've looked at, but just to echo this, registered independents are younger than both registered Democrats and Republicans. 59% of independents in the closed primary states are under 50. So when we talk about voter suppression, we have to start including the tens of millions of independents that are excluded from publicly funded primaries. This is the voting rights issue of our era and our generation. So, open primaries. What we see across the country is that closed partisan primaries divide Americans, and it's time to let all voters vote. We want to win that in all 50 states. What are the pathways? How do you get there? So one is through legislation, one is through litigation, and one is through ballot initiatives. I'm just going to start with ballot initiatives for a moment. So last year, a form of open primaries was on the ballot in 8 states. We lost all but 2. And you have to say, DC, we won, but wow, we haven't won it yet. And we could talk about this. Please ask me. I could say more about why those losses. We also won. The other win was Alaska, which was defending the Alaska primary system, which is the only one like it in the country, where you use open primaries, the top 4 vote getters go on to the fall, and then you use ranked choice voting. Lot to say about lessons learned last year, including that coupling open primaries and ranked choice voting in general doesn't help either reform. You're asking voters to do 2 things at once, but we could talk more about that. My point is, it's a very good route to go, but you have to have built very, very strong local leadership and local stakeholders to be able to prevail. Coming up next year, there's a wonderful team in Oklahoma, United Oklahomans. They have been working for years now to be ready to put an initiative on the ballot for a nonpartisan primary in the state. They have a wonderful network across the state. They've built tremendous support, and they just won the first legal victory. They filed their initiative, and the Republican Party took them to court and said, "Yo, you can't do this. It's not legal." And the courts have ruled that they can go ahead and petition to get on the ballot. So we are very hopeful that in 2026, Oklahomans will get to vote on reforming their primary structure. Then legislation. So this is a great story, because initially in the open primaries movement, a lot of the funders and a lot of other people in the space said, you can't win a legislative campaign. Are you crazy? Why would Democrats and Republicans give up control? And that's a reasonable, very reasonable argument. But we won a semi-open primary in Maine after, again, a decade of work. And then this February, we won in New Mexico. And I had the pleasure of being involved in the New Mexico campaign. Lots of great lessons learned there. The New Mexico campaign, again, it was a decade. Initially, the activists tried a court case. They tried other bills, many cycles. And all the while, they were building their network and their coalition and able to fundraise and then bring on a very dynamic organizer to really take that coalition to the fore. And they were able to hire a lobbyist. And along with that, we were able to have independent voters be the public face of the campaign. What's key in all of this work is that you have to take independent voters from a statistic or a number and a myth and all of that garbage, and you have to turn it into real people, neighbors, your policemen, your best friend's kids. Like, you have to show who is being enfranchised by opening the primaries and who are you locking out. And independent voters have to be, put front and center, and they were in New Mexico, and I think it made a very, very big difference there. So there is currently legislation underway in Pennsylvania, and we feel like that's been percolating for a number of years, and we might be getting to a tipping point. The other way to go is litigation, and it's a tough road. But the thing about litigation is that there's been no successful, profound movement for social change in this country that didn't have a litigation arm, right? Slavery, civil rights, you name it. Litigation was definitely embedded in the movement. And so I'm very excited that this year, open primaries we've really seen this take off after many years of work to develop the legal networks, the legal thinking, to bring some of these cases. So Open Primaries Education Fund brought a case in Maryland. Back in May, we represented 5 independent voters. 21.6% of Marylanders can't vote. We're working with a top law firm in Maryland, and the case is beginning to move through the courts. There are now cases in Pennsylvania, Oregon, Wyoming, and a case out of Florida that an independent who's a retired attorney brought on his own. He lost the first round, went to an appeal, lost, and now he's asked the Supreme Court to take his case. Now, I'm going to say a few things more about the Supreme Court in a moment. The thing that I've learned about litigation is it's not even just what happens in the courtroom. When you file a lawsuit, the level of media attention that you can bring to this issue of how the primaries are structured is through the roof. When we filed the lawsuit in Maryland, there were 200 pieces. One was in the Washington Post, which is nationally read, right? In Pennsylvania, one of our plaintiffs was Michael Schmerkanish, obviously media personality and longtime independent voter. So he had a show, one of his Saturday morning shows, devoted to the issue of independent voters and the lockout from primaries. So that's why litigation strategy has to be embedded in a broader movement, but it brings many more eyes to the issue. Just a word about the Florida case that's now the Supreme Court has been asked to take it. I don't know that they will, because they don't have to take every case. They have to decide what cases really are true controversies that require the intervention of the Supreme Court. But one of these cases is going to make it to that level. And Open Primaries, with our partners at the Forward Party and the Independent Voter Project, wrote an amicus brief that was filed 2 weeks ago, urging the Supreme Court to take up the Florida case. And I just wanted to share this quote from the amicus. And if people are interested, I can put a link. I can send you guys a link. The amicus brief is brilliant in its framing. So the whole brief kind of flushes out this question: does the right to vote at an integral stage of a publicly funded election derive from citizenship or from membership in a political party? And that to me is so helpful. I think the answer is obvious, but that's what the court has to really decide, that we actually have a right as citizens to vote in publicly funded elections.
Kathy, there was a question in the chat about tracking what some of these states that are in litigation to tracking those cases. Is
So,
there a good way of doing that?
great question. I would say the best way to have a handle on all of them is to sign up for the Open Primaries newsletter, which is called Primary Buzz. And we cover every development in the case as it breaks. And it's a weekly newsletter. And I would say that's the best place to holistically see what's happening. Otherwise, it can get a little. But Jeremy Gruber, who is our senior vice president and attorney, one of his main areas of work is this whole litigation, effort that's underway across the country. So he tracks it all for us and for our newsletter. And I'm going to show you a link so people could easily go to the Open Primaries website and sign up. Let me end with this thought. John Updike, who's the president of Open Primaries, wrote an op-ed for The Hill back in June. And one of the things that he wrote was the American people are pretty clear. They want a political culture that's participatory, innovative, responsive to ordinary people, and effective at making our lives better. Independents are an engine for that kind of change. Let's lean into that. And let me I love that. That's obviously that's my passion and work is building that engine. I'll open up for questions, but let me just leave this screen up for a moment and then I'll stop the share. But just so you can grab my email, always happy to talk to any of you, any questions, anything that comes up. And those are our two websites. All right, I'm going to stop my share so we can see each other. Any other questions?
There's a comment that says that from Kim Lewis, she's still reeling from the defeat in Idaho. Do you know about the Idaho one? Can you tell us like how close it was or about that decision a little bit in detail?
So Kim, you might know the stats off the top better than I do. I'm gonna answer broad strokes, some of what we saw last year, some of the problems that we saw. So one issue that emerged was an issue of how the funders thought about funding the campaigns on the ground. And look, we need funders. And these are folks with a lot of means, and some of them are organizations with a lot of means, but a lot of what they did was overrule the local leadership and go to consultants and have consultants design their ads and have consultants give them very bad advice, like you don't need to fund an on-the-ground get out the vote effort and local spokespeople. You just should stay quiet till the very, very, very end and then come in with ads. Very, very bad strategy, right? Like losing strategy. So Kim, I really love your choice of reeling from the defeat, because I think a lot of us, it was very painful. However, so that was one lesson learned. I would say the other lesson learned, and it is an important lesson, is that I think trying to combine opening the primaries with ranked choice voting did not work. I think voters were like, well, you're asking for a lot all at once. Or some of these consultants would lean on the open primary side and not fully transparently say it was doing both. So people lost trust. So a big, big issue coming out of 2024 was that there has to be trust established between the voters in a state and the leaders who are putting forth an initiative. And if you can't build that trust, you are going to lose, and you should lose, right? So those are some broad stroke things that we saw. Here's what I would say is that I think the movement had to go through that big growing pains. And, you know, when we started 2025 at open primaries, we had no idea what this was all going to look like. We are having the biggest, most vibrant year in our existence in terms of the number of places that are working, the numbers of committees that are getting established and working on the ground. We're also playing defense. No bones about it. We have a really intense situation in Texas where now that they're done with gerrymandering, the Republican Party has taken the state to court because they want the state to close the primaries for them. It's an outrageous request on so many levels, including that in Texas, you don't join a party. It's a nonpartisan voter registration state. So you're asking them to upend the whole culture of voter registration. So we're involved at the grassroots on that one, and we're looking to intervene legally. We have a similar situation, although it's legislative, in Ohio. So yes, there's defense that we've been doing all year, but there's just a lot more momentum of people saying, we got to fix the primaries. I see a hand.
Yeah,
EJ?
from EJ. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess my question kind of goes along those lines. Like, how many states are taking initiative to push for open primaries, or is this mostly coming from the people? Because I feel like I came from I'm from Virginia. We have open primaries. I'm now in Utah, which very much is closed, and I can't ever see like Utah voluntarily opening up their Republican primary, which is closed. I think their Democratic one is open.
You're right.
I'm like, in what situation would states that have like really strong majorities actually feel like incentivized to do that on their own? Are there states that are doing that, or is it mainly like people pushing to open those up because they feel disenfranchised? I'm just curious what that dynamic looks like.
That is a great question. Really good question. So one thing that I would say is that it's important to realize that in general, so in Texas, it's the Republican Party, right? That's trying to do away with closed primaries. In New York, guess who the opponents of open primaries are? The Democratic Party, right? So it's sort of like it's an equalizer in a bad way. But I just want to be clear about that the partisan interests have to do with ruling parties a lot. However, the New Mexico situation is a good example. So there, it was a totally Democratic-controlled legislature, Democratic Secretary of State, and Democratic governor, and we got it passed. And there, again, 10 years of work on the ground. It was independents and this coalition banging at the door. I'll tell you a story, though. One of the things that worked, was very effective. There was a couple of legislators, Democrats. We really needed their support. You know what moved them? Not the fancy lobbyist. Not our lobbyist was phenomenal. He wasn't so fancy. He was really good, and he really believes in the issue. But leaving that aside, what moved them was independent voters in their districts coming up to them and saying, hey, I can't vote for you in the primary. I'd even like to vote for you, but this is wrong. Why can't I? In Maine, one of our main spokespeople and main introducer of the bill was a new state senator. She was a Democrat, and immediately she got a Republican to work with her. The reason she went for the issue is that when she was running for office and walking and knocking on doors, she met independent after independent after independent that said, I like you. I'd like to vote for you. She was young. She's very, very dynamic, but I can't. How is that right? So she came into office knowing that this issue was a problem in her district for the people that she was supposed to represent. So what I would say, EJ, is that I think that we've never seen a state take the issue up on its own. We have seen parties out of power open their primaries. That's your situation in your state. And we're now in Florida, the Democratic Party that viciously opposed open primaries when we were on the ballot in 2020. We got 57% of the vote, by the way. But that's not enough to win in Florida. You need 60%. But the Democratic Party, they were outrageous in their opposition. Now they're considering opening their primaries. Why? There's 3.4 million independents in the state of Florida, and the Democratic Party is losing, right? They got to do something. They have to broaden their base. So the question for activists becomes, how do we use those situations to build broader momentum in the state? In your state, there are activists trying to figure out next steps and not trying to figure out what to do. I really believe that the key is a network of activists, leaders, becoming leaders who say, okay, we're going to work on this issue. Now, what do we do? That's a lot of our work, is working with folks who say, this is just wrong. Help me. What's the first step? What's the next step? And you work and you figure out where are those little cracks that we can push to get some light of day on the criticalness of the issue. That was kind of a long answer, but
No, that was great. Thank you so much. This is really interesting.
yeah.
So there's some questions in the chat asking about how can we be the most effective? How can we bring the, like, where do we start? Do we take it to our representatives? Like, what do we do? How do we?
So I think it's very state dependent. So literally, I would be happy to talk with everybody on your specific state situation and see what I know about what's going on. So that's like the specific, how to really target it. Let's look at state by state, because there might be things going on that you might not know about, right? Because they're still under the surface. The second thing I would say is becoming visible as an independent voter, writing a letter to the editor about how wrong you think it is that independents can't vote is a huge starting point. And yes, meeting with a representative, if you can get them at a town hall meeting and get them on the record, if you can get a meeting with their chief of staff to talk about this issue, those three things, and then tell us about it so we can publicize it. I can't tell you how much everyone laughs at me, but I know you guys know this because you do a whole series of opportunities for people to learn how to write letters to the editor. I get laughed at all the time until people see what happens. So in New Mexico, we had a young Native American activist, Rodzaya, wrote a letter to the editor in their very small local paper. Meanwhile, their elected official was still undecided. Letter got published. The next week, another voter wrote another letter in support. Now, don't tell me that that didn't help Representative Hernandez know that his constituents cared about this. So I'm a big fan of those three actions. So yeah, talking to your representative, trying to get them on the record publicly, very helpful, or doing a meeting, writing a letter to the editor, and then let us know so we can publicize it so more people can say, oh, someone's doing that. Let me reach out. I'm not alone. Because here's the other thing that's true, and I probably didn't stress this enough. We have a volunteer event once a month called the Power Hour. And one of the women on the Power Hour, she's probably in her 40s, professional. She said, you know, I thought it was just like 2% of the country was independent. I had no idea. So independence becoming visible helps empower another independent to say, oh, I'm not alone. Because that's what they want us to think, is that we are the only ones in our community, in our city, that feel this way. And I'm putting my thing I'm putting my email in the chat for everybody. It would help if I could spell.
I stuck it in there for you.
Oh, thank you.
So you don't have to worry.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I will just put a plug in for MWAG's op-ed lab that you talked about it. But if you aren't familiar, or if you're just like, I don't know what to write, or I don't know, they really will work with you and help you to organize your ideas and focus your thoughts, and they'll edit for you. And then the best part is that MWAG has relationships with certain publications that they can help you. They will tell you who to send it to so that you because sometimes you're like, yeah, I'll write an op-ed, but then what do I do with this piece that I've written? And that's where the op-ed lab comes in really handy, because they will direct you where to send your op-ed. And if it doesn't get picked up by the first choice publication, then they'll have a second and a third, and just some other ideas of um, how to get your piece published. So
That's
um,
so
and
awesome.
and that's a great thing. Like Kathy was saying, is once it's published, a lot of times, or you will see on MWAG Central that we will share op-eds written by MWAG members. So then you can reshare those, and it's that same idea that Kathy was talking about, that then it gets picked up and it gets, distributed to a lot more people. So please, if you're feeling it, Christina, I think Maryland could use an op-ed. I'm just
Oh,
saying, you
oh,
you look
oh,
passionate
yes.
about this, and use the op-ed lab to write something, and use the resources that NY provides. We'd love to help you.
And if you are in Maryland, I don't know if you guys have a full list, but I have a full list for letters to the editor there because of our lawsuit. We have independents trying to get letters published across the state. So just to say, yeah.
Are there any other questions? I'm looking to see if we missed any. I did put a link a little bit further up about open primaries, that there's a link at openprimaries.org for your state specific. So if you go, then you can put your state in. So you can go there. And like I said, also you can find Kathy on MWAG Central as a member, and her email is in the chat. But if we don't have any questions, I just want to thank you for being here. It's so
Oh,
great.
it's great. Do I have a moment to address Christina's question about redistricting?
For sure.
So I'll try to do this briefly. Here's one of the concerns that we have, is that obviously what is happening in many states where the Republican Party is trying to maneuver and gerrymander midstream between the censuses is wrong. Equally of concern is some of the ways that the Democratic Party is responding, including what's happening in California, where there is a citizen redistricting commission. It's very popular. It's doing a very good job. And so there, he's putting an initiative on the ballot with the state legislature's full backing to gerrymander and to put the Citizens Redistricting Commission aside, supposedly for 3 terms, 3 rounds. The concern is, I don't think you can fight anti-democratic moves with anti-democratic moves. And a concern, which is what we just saw in Texas, is if you go after redistricting, then the next thing you're going to go after in open primary states is you're going to go after closing those primaries. It's like a very slippery slope. So that's a shorthand version of, and that's just such a very, very important question. I just wanted to grab a moment to share a few thoughts on that. And it's been great to be here. It's great to talk with you all.
Yes, so thank you so much. This is so much information. The recording of today's Grow will be on MWAG Central, and of course today we'll also put this on our YouTube, MWAG's YouTube channel, which you are welcome to share that YouTube link with anybody that you think would benefit from learning more about open primaries. If your state is a closed state, we would encourage you to share with people there who just may not know exactly how it works or how they can get more involved. So there's so much great information here in today's Grow, but also you can go to openprimaries.org and get more information there, or you can email Kathy and ask her your questions and she will help you. So thank you so much to everyone for joining us, and we will see you guys next week. Have a good day.
Hi, everybody.